Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be learning all about how you can grow and process your own flax from seeds into being fibre, which is ready to spin. So we're going to have a look at farming, we're going to look at harvesting, and then a whole range of different processes, and I'll describe all the different tools that you'll need and how you can make your own tools at home. So it's really a beginner's guide. And later there'll be another video showing the spinning process as well. So the first step to growing your own flax, to spin your own linen, is obviously planting the seeds. Now, we didn't want to film this outside, so we're doing a little tiny demonstration in here, but you want to make sure that you've bought Fibre flax seeds, because obviously there's another variety, the linseed variety of flax, which is for seed production, and so that'll grow shorter and produce lots of seeds like these, which I'm sure you might recognise from things you can add to breakfast cereals or smoothies. And so you want to buy Fibre flax seeds. I can put some links to places to buy it from. And you want to make sure that you're getting the seed rate right. So I've measured these out, and that is 12 grams of flax seeds per metre squared of space in the garden. Or if you're on a big scale, that's 120 kilograms per hectare, if any of you are doing this on a really big scale. And actually, this tiny little patch is only 10 centimetres square, so I only need about 1 gram. Oh, okay, there we go, we'll say that's enough. And so you want to make some little rows. Obviously, they don't need to be this tiny. This is on a miniature scale. And then try and evenly spread the seeds around the area that you're planting them in. They don't need to go super deep. You can actually broadcast them onto the surface and then rake over them, but I found last year that they got eaten by birds, so we then had to replant them, and we tried instead doing them in little rows and like properly covering them up, and also putting a bit of netting over to dissuade the birds, and that made a big difference. So especially if you have a lot of birds, I would recommend properly burying them. And the time of year to plant them is around now. So in sort of further south where it's a bit warmer, it'll be like end of March, up to, I think in Scotland last year we even planted some in May. So I'd say around April would be a great time to plant some flax seeds in the UK. After you've planted your flax, it'll take about 100 days to grow. So I've got a few slides here showing some which I grew with the farmer George Young at Fobbing Farms 2 seasons ago. So this is the Nathalie variety, which we got from Vanderbilt, Zeden and Vlas in the Netherlands, who are seed breeders. And this is it going into the seed drill. And we can see here, this is the seed drill. So I planted a hectare of flax, which is a lot. So you don't need a machine this big to do a couple of meters in your back garden. So we planted it on the 1st of April, which turned out to be a bit early actually, because it then didn't rain for 2 weeks. And then this is it in bloom, and I love the flax flowers, which are these beautiful little blue delicate flowers. So this is, you can see a whole field of it. And then this is slightly later on, and you can see that all of the flowers have turned into these little round seed heads. And you can tell when flax is ready to harvest because the stems start to change colour. So you can see in the central photo, there's yellow at the bottom of the stalk, and you want to wait until it's about 2/3 yellow to 1/3 green at the top is like roughly the time that you want to start harvesting. and this is actually before the seeds have fully ripened. So if you want to save seeds to plant more next year, you want to leave a little patch to fully ripen for seed saving, and to harvest it at the ideal time for the best fibre is slightly before that. So you want to harvest the fibre flax first. And so, yeah, we harvested 114 days after sowing. So yeah, normally it takes about 100 days, but because of it being incredibly dry at the beginning of April, we waited an extra 2 weeks for it to be fully ready. And we had a lot of volunteers come down to Fobbing Farms to help, which was great. And then you can see here, we've got all of the flax laid out in rows to ret. So retting is the first stage in actually processing it, and retting is essentially rotting. And what you want to happen is for the rain and the microbes from the soil to slightly break down and slightly decompose the flax, and that helps the fibres get out. Because if you tried to just pick flax and process it straight away, all of the pectins and lignins, which are the sort of parts of the cell that all glue the plant together, and it would be completely impossible. So what you want to do is lay it out in little rows on the ground and let it get rained on. And it's a sort of difficult process to get right, so it can take between 2 and 6 weeks to ret, depending on the weather. And advice that I got from some experienced French flax farmers was you want to wait for about 30 millilitres of rain and then flip it over, and then wait for another 30 millilitres of rain on the other side, and then you can stook it and dry it out, and it should be ready for processing. The other option is you can stick it in a big bucket of water for 10 days and water ret it. And so this is a lot more precise, and if you have only grown a small patch, then much more achievable. The only downside to that is it will create some very smelly wastewater, which you'll have to dispose of. So I don't recommend doing this in the bath. You definitely want to do it in a bucket outside. Retting is really difficult to get right, and I've got an example here of what not to do. So this is some under-retted flax, and this is some over-retted flax. And the under-retted flax, it's still very pale and yellow in colour, and you can see that when it's been bent, it doesn't snap. It's still really intact and it's just bending round, whereas the over-retted flax, when it's been bent, has started to fully snap in half. So not only is the inner woody core breaking up, but also the actual fibres themselves are snapping. And so what I would recommend when you're retting flax is to occasionally take a bit and dry it out, and then try snapping it up in your hands. And so what you're looking for is only the inner core to snap into bits and the actual fibre itself to remain intact. So the next step is going to be breaking the flax. So after it's retted and dried out, we want to start snapping up the fibres like this. And the reason we're doing this is because we want to snap up the inner woody core, which is called shive. And the fibres are actually in between the outer skin and this inner woody core. And you can see, even from a little bit of snapping, the fibres are starting to pop out. So you can get a range of different tools to help doing this. One of which is like a flax break, which is like a big wooden set of jaws. But even if you don't have any specialist equipment, you can just use a block of wood on a table and start snapping up the flax like this, and just using the wood as like a hard edge to break the flax against it. And you can really hear the nice crispy crunchy sounds of the inner core like snapping and coming out. There's a bit of it there. And it's really important to make sure that it's like a hot or at least very dry environment. If it's very like humid or wet, that can make this part of the flax processing very difficult. Flax responds very well to water, it absorbs a lot of water, and so that's very useful for spinning and weaving, because the water makes the sort of pectins and lignins within the plant stick together. But obviously when you're trying to snap it up, that's the opposite of what you want to happen. And that big crunch, that's the root end, which are a lot more crunchy. So once we've got this as snapped up as possible, the next stage is called scutching. And scutching essentially means scraping. So the traditional tool for that is a scutching knife, which is like a wooden blade. And again, you can get recreation ones. I've actually got this really nice tool which Simon from Flaxland has made, which is a combination of a block for breaking, and then it has like quite a sharp corner for scutching, and it also has like a wide tooth comb. So we can use something like this, and what you want to do is very firmly hold your bundle of flax about 3/4 of the way along, and then scrape out from the middle. And you want to be pressing down quite hard and squashing the fibres, as well as scraping off any of the little bits of inner core which are still clinging on. And if you don't have a sort of specialist tool like this, I've actually also been using this big wooden spatula instead. So you can use things you might have lying around at home. This stage in the process is pretty messy, so here I've put on a tarp, but I would actually recommend just doing it outside if possible. And you want to make sure that you're doing both ends of the fibre, so do one side and then flip around and do the other side. And once it's nicely scutched, you should lose all of the inner core, and you can really see the fibres starting to come out. So, once the flax has been fully scutched, we should expect that nearly all of the inner core and the outer skin have been scraped away. And you can see we're left with a lot of little bits of shiv and some tow. And tow is the name that's given to the shorter, fluffier, kind of knotted fibres that get combed out. And these can actually be saved up. There's a lot of uses and byproducts you can do with the tow, including rope making, which I think is where we get a tow rope from. But also some people use it as animal bedding or even insulation. And it can also be composted. So if you don't have animals to make beds for or things to insulate, then you can just sweep all this up and take it to the compost. The next stage we're going to do is called heckling or hackling, and that is essentially combing. So the point of the next step is to really get all the knots out, any last little bits of skin or shive that are like clinging on to the fibres, and prepare them ready to go on the distaff and ready to be spun. So the next stage is hackling or heckling. So we're going to take the scutched fibre here, if I can, yeah, which you can see has lost most of its outer skin. You can really see the hair-like fibres coming out. And we're going to comb it with a set of heckling combs. So this is the first comb, which is the biggest, widest tooth comb. And this is something which my friend Pete at the farm helped me make out of some nails and a bit of wood. So it's quite easy DIY project. You can measure out on the back sort of like regular intervals for the nails and drill a little pilot hole and then hammer them in. And I would recommend square nails rather than round nails if you can get hold of them, just because that helps with scraping the fibres. And I'm attaching them to the table with some clamps, which makes it a lot easier and more efficient. So similar to the scutching and breaking, I'm going to hold it maybe 3/4 of the way along really firmly. And just like with combing out knotty hair, you want to start at the edge, start at the ends and go towards the middle. And then once that side's been done, I'm going to switch around. And you want to hold, again, about 3/4 of the way along, so you're making sure that the middle's getting done twice, actually. And once you've got most of the big knots out, we can then move on to the next set of heckling combs, which are a lot smaller, and these are also very sharp, which is important because it helps split apart the fibres and really get rid of any knots or any of the inner core that's kind of still in there. I'm going to do the other side. And you can collect up the toe, which is the shorter fibres which have been left behind. And this is a lot cleaner toe, and it'll get nicer and nicer quality as you kind of go through the different grades of combs. And so this is the kind of stuff that you could use for rope making, for example. So it's worth saving this if that's something you're interested in trying out. And then the final set of combs are these very sharp ones, which again I got from Simon at Flaxland. I don't know if you can see. There we go. So yeah, that's 2 rows of very sharp, very close together, like pointy combs. And these are really gonna sort out any knots and leave us with really nice, shiny and aligned fibres, which are ready for putting on the distaff and spinning. I think this is my favourite step in the process because you can really see it becoming hair-like, and it really reminds me of the Rumpelstiltskin story of spinning straw into gold, and you see all of the straw falling away and this lovely shiny fibre being left behind. I think it also is very vividly, you can imagine where the idea of flaxen hair comes from. It looks so hair-like. So yeah, this is what you want to end up with. And the next step we'll do is dressing the distaff, but first we need to clear all of the little bits of fluff and shiv off the table.